CNN safety analyst David Susi joins me now from Pensacola Beach, Florida. He's a former FAA safety inspector and author of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 and Safer Skies. David, good to see you. How unusual is it for an engine to break up in the way it did?
Extremely unusual. I've never investigated anything or heard of anything in at least in the United States that caused that. It's very, very rare. Now, I've seen where like a door came off or a piece came off or something like that, but I've never seen an in-flight failure of this significance.
So what are investigators going to be looking for? What leaps to your mind when you see not just the debris, but the video we're showing now of the engine itself? What does it tell you?
Well, what the engine tells me is you can see that it's not just standing still. It's not just like staying in one place. It's rotating. It's off balance. You can see that. So I'd be looking to see if any of the fan blades had come off of the engine. But the first clue I'd be looking for is, does any of the debris on the ground have burn marks, or does it have explosion or impact marks that would tell us whether it was an explosion or not? The eyewitness said it sounded like a sonic boom. So the only thing that noise could come from that aircraft in a normal sense would be a compressor stall. A compressor stall happens when something hampers the flow into the engine or slows it. And at that point, it can slow down to a significant amount where it's not pushing the compression in the engine out the back anymore. It starts overpowering itself and comes out the front of the engine. Now that's common when you're landing an aircraft. Sometimes the compressor stalls will happen when you put on the thrust reversers, when you feel that thrust coming back on the airplane. But that's on the ground, and that's not where this was. This was in the air, of course. And so that's the first thing I'd be looking for, is those fan blades, see if they're intact. And then second, looking at the debris to see if there is any fire or evidence of explosion there. But I really don't think they'll find that. What I think they will find is that compressor stall occurred. It can happen from a flock of birds. It can happen from a lot of different things to get in the intake of the aircraft or the engine. And at that point, that Pratt & Whitney engine will just kick back at you, and it can be pretty severe when it does.
It was interesting to see the pilots union make the point that no United pilots were furloughed during all of what's happened over the last year, and it just made me think. It points to retention of experience, which would be pretty important at times like this. What would have been the challenge for the pilots? The changes in how the aircraft immediately behaved and getting it back on the ground?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and they handled it right, they called Mayday immediately, which is what has to happen, and they did that to clear the skies to make sure that they don't get in the way of any other aircraft in the area. They weren't very high. They hadn't been flying very long. They were still in the exit path from the airport. So they did the right thing by clearing the airway. Then the next thing they're going to have to be faced with is extinguishing any fire that's going on in there. And obviously from the videos, you can see that there is fire. Where that fire is really interesting to me, because it appears to be coming from right behind in what we call the intermediate stage, or the intermediate compressor stage of the engine. Now that particular area, it's not a high pressure. It's a medium pressure. It's not a high pressure, but to have a failure there and to have flames come out of there is very, very rare. Now, again, the pilot would have to be faced with how to extinguish that. Is the challenge when the cowling and the nacelles have come off the engine, because it's designed, if there's a fire in the engine and you pull the fire bottles, it's going to try to extinguish the fire around the engine. But if the nacelles aren't there, it doesn't contain all the fire retardant, so it doesn't work very well. It's not effective. So you can see that fire continues to burn because there's nothing encapsulating it. All that stuff has been torn off, and all that, by the way, is attached to that big ring you saw in the front. That's the forward nacelle. It's the inlet, and if that comes off, that's pretty much what holds or attaches to all the cowlings too. So if that major piece comes off of there, it's going to take all that cowling with it.
Well, some good flying, and fortunately a good outcome. CNN safety analyst David Susi, good to see you. Thanks, David.
You too. Thank you.